Glory to Jesus Christ. One of the multitude said to him, "Teacher, bid my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or divider over you?" And he said to them, "Take heed and beware of all covetousness, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." This is what Jesus says immediately before today's parable of the rich fool. And it gives us the confirmation of Jesus' message. In the basic message, Jesus teaches us a very clear lesson about our relationship with God and our relationship with the things of this world, and what Jesus' role is here on earth, mainly to teach us about eternal life and not to be concerned about the material aspects of our time here on earth. Jesus is speaking to us about our life and how our lives are more important and profound than the things with which we fill up our time here on earth. The rich fool filled up his life, filled up his person, filled up his time here on earth with manual labor and plans. He was concerned more about taking care of himself and reveling in what his land and what his servants could produce than he was concerned about the true state of his soul. The barns and storage he used year after year were no longer enough for him. And instead of giving out of his abundance, keep in mind, we're not really supposed to give out of our abundance, we're supposed to give out of what we have. But even him, instead of giving out of the abundance that he had, or even selling his abundance for profit, so that at least others could make use of this in a timely fashion, he now decides to go through the extra work of rebuilding his storage to an even larger volume, so he can retain even more earthly possessions for himself. The rich fool is putting himself first in his life without any noticeable recognition of God. We are taught in the commandments to have no other gods, or to have no false gods besides the Holy. To have any false gods besides the Holy Trinity. Not that the Holy Trinity is a false god, that came out weird. When we put our whole lives' emphasis on things and accumulating more and more for a future that we cannot possibly envision, meaning that there's really no way for us to know the length of our days, or what challenges we will encounter, or what blessings we will encounter. But when we assume that we need to assure the abundance of our future, then we often tend to neglect the reality of our own dignity. We tend to neglect the fullness of our own lives. We tend to neglect shoring up the pleasure and merriment of our eternal souls. Now, Jesus gives us a deeper spiritual message in addition to the basic lessons of putting God first in our lives. Jesus is equating life with soul, and soul with life, showing us that these two concepts are in fact pointing towards the singular reality of our person and not to lesser elements that make up our whole. In most translations, the rich fool said, "I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Take your ease.'" But in our liturgical New American Bible translation, it reads, "I will say to myself." Now, the Greek word, pixi, is directly translated as soul, because the only two meanings are either breath or soul. But also because translating pixi as soul provides a much richer meaning for us, while also showing us the depths of the rich man's folly. The rich man is a fool because he thought to himself that his soul would be in a good state and would be merry and wouldn't have to worry because of the abundance of its material wealth. But as we know, God will have the final say and the final teaching moment. He will take that fool's life, and his soul will have nothing. If the rich fool would have freely given to those in need out of his abundance, shared the joys of his bountiful crops and land, and put his faith in God rather than worldly materialism first, then he would in turn have received a much more glorious ease and merriment of his soul, resting in the bosom of Abraham forever. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Ave Maria, Stella